There's a job out in the middle of the ocean that quietly breaks people, and somehow also builds them into something stronger. And almost no one on land has any idea what these workers go through. This is the world of offshore wind crews. The people who disappear for weeks at a time, climb 260-meter towers in freezing wind, and rewire their own psychology just to stay sane. In this video, you'll see the side of clean energy no one talks about, the isolation, the danger, the brutal mental strain, and why so many workers start to feel more at home in the ocean than with their own families. And once you hear what actually happens out there, you won't look at a wind turbine the same way again. Before we head offshore, make sure you subscribe for more insane stories about the hardest jobs on the planet. It starts on a September morning in 2025 at a harbor on the Danish coast. A line of workers walks across the pier with duffel bags slung over their shoulders. Not suitcases, just small duffels packed with everything they'll own for the next 14 days. Clothes, snacks, a photo or two, a few toiletries, maybe a book they won't have the energy to read. Ahead of them is a 90-meter service vessel, the thing that will become their entire world, their home, their workplace, their prison, and sometimes the only thing standing between them and the North Sea swallowing them whole. The ship doesn't look dangerous. It actually looks pretty ordinary, but for the workers stepping onto that gangway, there's a weird, quiet understanding. Once they board, land stops belonging to them. They've crossed the line, and the ocean takes over. 2 hours later, the shoreline disappears. It doesn't fade slowly. It snaps out of existence like someone erased the world with a giant blue marker. Just ocean and sky and nothing in between. Veteran workers don't talk during this part. New ones pretend they're fine. But there's this moment. It hits each person differently, where their brain realizes there's no quick exit anymore. No pulling over, no running home, no ambulance, no normal rules. The horizon becomes a perfect circle, and the ship heads straight to the center of it. When the turbines finally rise up out of the haze, they look wrong. Too big, too still, too alien. Each tower is taller than the Golden Gate Bridge. The blades sweep an area larger than a football field. And the nacelle, the machine house at the top, is the size of a double-deck bus, just floating 260 meters above the sea like some abandoned spaceship. This is where they'll work, every day. No weekends, no holidays, no, let's finish this tomorrow. Offshore time is different. It's mechanical, ruthless, circular. The service vessel holds position beside the turbines using insane computer systems that make thousands of tiny adjustments every second, fighting the waves so the ship doesn't drift even a meter. Inside, the workers get assigned their cabins. If you've never been in one, imagine a closet, then shrink it. A single bunk, a metal locker, a desk barely big enough for a laptop. Everyone says the same thing about the first night. You lie there, listening to the engines humming under your feet, the sea slapping the hull, the floor shifting with every swell, and your brain whispers, you're not getting off this ship for 2 weeks. Some people fall asleep immediately. Others stare at the ceiling until morning. Both reactions are normal. At 5 a.m., the alarm cuts through the vessel like someone dragged a knife straight through silence. Nobody snoozes it. Offshore workers don't do 5 more minutes. They file into the mess hall. Breakfast is heavy. Eggs, sausage, fried potatoes, because the chefs know morale lives and dies on food out here. A bad breakfast can ruin an entire shift. Then comes the toolbox talk, a simple safety meeting on shore. But out here it feels like a verbal contract with the universe. The supervisor reads from a script, weather, hazards, tasks. What could go wrong? What you do if things do go wrong? And everyone listens. Not because they're supposed to, but because offshore workers know the sea doesn't forgive mistakes. After breakfast, the crew heads to the changing room. This is where the transformation begins. Not dramatic like a superhero movie, but slow, heavy, uncomfortable. Layer by layer, they build their second skin. First, the immersion suit, thick, waterproof, and unbelievably hot. If you fall into the North Sea without it, you're gone in minutes. It keeps you alive, but it also feels like wearing a sauna made of rubber. Next, the life jacket, with a personal locator beacon that will start screaming into the sky if you hit the water. Then, the climbing harness, the thing that literally keeps you from falling 260 meters to your death. Helmet, safety glasses, steel-toe boots, gloves. By the time they're fully geared up, they're carrying an extra 20 to 30 pounds. They walk differently, they breathe differently, their minds click into a different mode. This isn't the same person who ate breakfast a few minutes ago. This is someone who has to factor death into every movement. And then comes the moment nobody admits they're afraid of. The ship extends a gangway, a long yellow arm, toward the turbine. The waves push the vessel up and down, left and right, and yet the gangway somehow stays still. The computer systems inside it are doing math faster than the human brain can process motion. The crew steps forward. Everything in their senses screams, "This thing is moving." This is insane, but the tech holds, and workers learn to trust the tech more than their own instinct. Once their boots hit the turbine platform, they're inside a different world. Metal, wind, and a sound like the inside of a giant drum. Inside the tower is a narrow cylinder, cold, echoing, smelling faintly of machine oil and metal. There's an elevator, but it only takes them part of the way. The rest, climbing. Sometimes 100 meters straight up. Wearing full gear, carrying tools, maintaining 3 points of contact at all times. Your breathing gets loud inside the immersion suit. Your shoulders burn. Your calves shake. The walls feel too close, too vertical, too endless. Every worker describes it the same way. The climb is a daily test, a psychological checkpoint, a reminder that the turbine doesn't care how tired you are. But once they reach the nacelle at the top, the world shifts again. The inside of the nacelle is compact, like the engine room of a ship, but suspended hundreds of meters above the sea. There's a generator that weighs several tons, gearboxes that hum like deep metallic animals, cooling systems, electrical cabinets, cables as thick as your wrist, and barely any room to move. The temperature can swing from freezing to oven hot depending on the weather and the machinery. Everything in here is built under stress, mechanical, electrical, or both. And every mistake is the kind you don't get a redo on. Touch the wrong wire, skip one safety step, misread torque specs, assume a system is dead when it's not. Out here, the margin for error is microscopic, but the physical danger isn't what breaks people, it's the isolation. Inside the nacelle, workers lose visual contact with everyone. The ship is gone. The world is gone. There's only radio chatter, small, clipped messages that don't feel human. The nacelle sways in the wind just enough to remind you that the entire structure is alive and moving. A lot of workers say you get this weird feeling, like you're inside the belly of some huge mechanical animal, and if it wanted to, it could swallow you without anyone noticing. Hours go by, tasks get done, tools get passed, mistakes get double-checked, and the silence between radio calls gets longer. When the day finally ends, the climb back down feels heavier. Not physically, mentally, because you know tomorrow you'll do it all over again. Back on the vessel, something interesting happens. Normal social rules crumble. 20 to 30 people, trapped together for 2 weeks, dependent on each other for survival. It creates bonds fast and deep. Workers describe their crewmates in ways that make spouses uncomfortable, closer than siblings, more trustworthy than friends, people who know your habits, your fears, your tells, your moods. You cannot hide out here. Not your anger, not your sadness, not your weakness. When you're 260 meters up and tethered to a safety line, the person next to you is literally holding your life in their hands. That kind of trust rewires something in your brain. Meals in the mess hall turn into a ritual, not because of the food, because it's the only place where life feels normal. Workers swap stories about past rotations, other wind farms, near misses, weird mechanical failures, storms, jokes that only make sense offshore. It's a weird mix of therapy and gossip and survival training. And then there's the moment many workers dread. Every few days, someone tries to call home, but satellite connections glitch, voices cut out, faces freeze, and the world on land feels far away, too far to touch. Workers try to catch up on everything they've missed, but family members don't know how to summarize 2 weeks of life into 3 minutes of choppy signal. You hear kids in the background getting ready for school, and it hits you. You weren't there for any of it. But the hardest part isn't missing life on land. It's losing the ability to relate to it. The problems you hear, the small frustrations people complain about, they don't line up with the world you're living in. Your frame of reference shifts. Offshore workers start speaking a different emotional language. And then, the weather changes. Storm days are the worst. The sea doesn't care that you have work to do. It doesn't care about contracts or deadlines. When the waves go above 3 meters, gangway transfers shut down. Everything stops. The vessel becomes a cage. You can't work. You can't leave. You can't walk more than a few meters in any direction. At first, people try to stay busy. They go to the gym. They fix small things around the ship. They binge downloaded movies. They sleep. They pace. They complain. Then frustration turns into boredom. Boredom turns into claustrophobia. Claustrophobia turns into helplessness. Some workers describe feeling like the walls were closing in. Others say the storm days were the only time they felt truly afraid, not of dying, but of being powerless. On land, if you hate something, you leave. At sea, you sit with it for hours, for days, with no control. And that kind of psychological pressure builds up quietly, like water rising behind a dam. When the storm finally clears, the relief is almost physical. Workers rush back to the turbines, back to the climb, back to the danger. Because danger is familiar, danger is routine, danger gives you a sense of purpose. But the real storm doesn't happen offshore. It happens when workers go home. The return to land hits like emotional whiplash. After 2 weeks of structure, wake, eat, work, eat, sleep, land feels messy, loud, too open, too slow in some ways, too chaotic in others. Even the silence feels wrong. Beds that don't move feel weird. Food feels empty without the mess hall energy. Spouses have adapted to living alone for 2 weeks at a time. Kids have formed routines without their offshore parent. Decisions get made without you. Life moves on, not intentionally, but unavoidably. A lot of offshore workers describe coming home and feeling like a guest in their own house. Not unwanted, just out of sync. You try to jump back into normal life, but conversations feel shallow. Your patience is short, your mind drifts back to the ocean, and the countdown begins, the mental timer until you leave again. Some workers say they start packing days before they actually have to. Others admit something darker. They feel more like themselves offshore than they do at home. Because offshore, your purpose is crystal clear. At home, everything feels fuzzy and unpredictable, and that scares people, including the workers themselves. Over time, something happens to offshore crews, something nobody warns them about. They start living 2 lives. The offshore version, tough, focused, bonded to a small crew through danger and survival. And the land version, disconnected, tired, trying to shove 2 weeks of family time into a few days before leaving again. The longer you do the job, the harder it becomes to merge the two. Some workers eventually quit, not because they can't handle the turbines, but because they can't handle the emotional distance creeping into their home life. Others stay because offshore is the only place where everything makes sense anymore, but almost all of them say the same thing. People on land have no idea what offshore wind really costs. We see clean energy. We see spinning turbines. We see progress. We don't see the workers climbing into a metal tower while the sea roars beneath them. We don't see the fathers and mothers missing birthdays, anniversaries, first steps, last moments. We don't see the psychological toll of living half a life at a time. Offshore wind is clean, but the price is paid in isolation, in stress, in mental rewiring, in the quiet sacrifices made by people we never meet. And the craziest part? Most of them wouldn't trade it, because there's something almost addictive about that world. The control, the danger, the routine, the bond, the feeling that your work actually matters, that you're holding up a piece of the modern world with your bare hands. These crews have created a new kind of human lifestyle, something between sailor, engineer, psychologist, and survivor. A world where home is temporary, routine is sacred, danger is normal, weather is the law, and your closest family might not share your DNA, but your shift schedule. They live in 2 realities and belong fully to neither. Their kids grow up fast, their partners grow strong, their friendships drift, their identities split. And yet, when they look at a turbine they've fixed, something inside them clicks. A light in millions of homes is on because they climbed that tower, because they endured the storm, because they kept going. It's a strange kind of pride, a quiet one. the kind that doesn't show up on social media or in documentaries, until now. What offshore wind workers do is extraordinary, emotionally, physically, psychologically. It stretches the limits of what people can handle, and it proves something about human nature. We can survive almost anything when we believe the work matters. Offshore wind workers are the invisible backbone of clean energy. They climb into the sky, disappear into the ocean, and reshape their own minds just to keep the world running. And the deeper you look, the more you realize. This isn't just a job. It's a life that demands everything and gives back something almost impossible to describe. Watch the next video to keep going deeper into the stories no one else is telling.